One of the most fun weeks of the baseball year is finally here. Let's talk winter meetings. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, December 6th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Friday to all. And today we get to discuss one of my favorite weeks of the year, and that is MLB's winter meetings. Everybody will fly in and get to the resort hotel, whatever it is this year in Dallas is where it's being held this season, this winter, whatever, on Sunday. And then they will stay usually through about Thursday, but winter meetings officially, as far as the events go, end on Tuesday afternoon when the Rule 5 draft happens. The Rule 5 draft is always kind of the signal for the end of winter meetings. So we will get a week's worth of content from the winter meetings. And as I said on yesterday's show, growing up, this was like my favorite week of the year. I absolutely loved it. I would circle it on my calendar, right? I would get nothing done in school because I was just refreshing, my whatever, like the internet to see what news and notes and moves and stuff were happening. Since COVID, over the last 3 or 4 years, it has been wildly underwhelming. And for as much as I always get excited about it, just because it is, historically in my life, I have a lot of very fun and exciting memories during winter meetings, especially during the Dombrowski era. Lately, it has objectively been a lot quieter. And the MLB offseason has been getting dragged out longer and longer, and bigger names are waiting more and more and deeper into the offseason. And winter meetings, while there is still a lot of rumors that always fly around, and there's always really big talking points, and again, it's just kind of like a rumor factory because all 30 front offices are all in one building. It as far as actual moves has been a lot less lately. So we'll see what happens this year. I'm hoping for a little bit of a bounce back. And the reason why I'm hoping for a little bit of a bounce back in terms of excitement this season is because of Juan Soto. And obviously Ohtani was a free agent last year, and nobody is going to compare to Shohei Ohtani in terms of, marketability, talent. You can pretty much just say straight up. But Juan Soto is dang near as close as you're going to get. And I think the reason why I have a little bit of optimism in this year's winter meetings is because there have been several reports from the biggest baseball journalist in the world, Jeff Passan of ESPN being one of them, probably the biggest in the world, and did report that he expects, not that he's guaranteeing it, but he thinks that Juan Soto could sign by Monday morning. And if that is to happen, we have seen time and time again I just punted my table, so if the screen shook there and you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. We have seen time and time again that the rest of the free agent market doesn't really pick up until the biggest domino falls. This year, that is very obviously Juan Soto. Last year, that was very obviously Shohei Ohtani. So if we can start this week off with Juan Soto being signed, if we can get that Sunday evening, Monday morning, that could hopefully set a ton of movement for the rest of all of the free agent and trade markets that are all waiting for this biggest domino to fall. That is going to set the market for free agents, especially outfield free agents. That's going to determine how much money teams have, right? Teams that are given, front offices are given a budget by their ownership. And if they think they're in on Soto, they're obviously not gonna go out and be talking to a ton of other free agents and such, because they are going to use most of their resources for Soto. So if that no longer happens, then they're whole new players, and the agents are aware of that, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why I'm hopeful for this year's winter meetings. It sounds like the Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Mets are going to be the biggest players in that. There have obviously been a ton of reports about the Red Sox. If you're on Twitter, X, whatever, social media has been swarming with rumors, reports. I think they're fake reports, but who am I? I don't know anything either. So we will see what happens there. But it sounds like it is going to be between those three teams. And then obviously, with every big name free agent, you can't have a conversation without mentioning the Dodgers. Have apparently offered Soto a contract, and we'll see what happens with that. Just please not the Dodgers. Please. I'm good on that. I'm okay if they don't get Juan Soto. I think I'll live. Also, the amount of money that he's going to get is going to determine a lot, as I just mentioned. There's questions about whether it is going to be a record-setting contract. I mean, he's so young still. That's what makes Soto even more valuable than he already is, just from a talent perspective, right? He's already one of the most talented hitters, honestly, of this generation, like already. But it's as we talk about all the time here, a lot of free agents in baseball are around 30 years old just because of how the system is set up. Him being in his mid 20s makes it so that he is even more valuable than he already was. There's talks about him getting like 15 years and 700 mil. Like, it's who knows? And now you have the deferred money wrinkle that the Dodgers have been exploiting for the last couple of years. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how that plays out. Your Detroit Tigers, obviously, I hate to burst your bubble if you're kind of holding your breath or holding out hope here. They're not going to sign Juan Soto, but they will, or that will rather, open up a levy of moves that the Tigers maybe can be a little bit more realistically a part of. I think one of the biggest names I'm keeping an eye out for is Willy Adames after Juan Soto signs. And that could play into the Tigers' hand. I would love the Tigers to get Willy Adames. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the offseason. This is a guy that can play shortstop, can play second base, can play third base, presumably, and it has 30 home run pop. I mean, that's going to be a pretty good market for anywhere he goes. Also would be a reunion. Willy Adames was initially, when he was, 15, 16 years old, signed by the Detroit Tigers out of the Dominican Republic. So, and he was a part of that David Price, Austin Jackson trade back in 2014. So it would be a full circle moment for the Tigers to make a play at Adames. I'm not super hopeful on that. I don't really think that's going to happen. I think he's going to get a really big market, and I think until the Tigers do spend a lot of money on someone, I'm going to kind of be hesitant that is going to happen. That is in the Scott Harris regime. Obviously, they spent money, whether we like it or not, on Javi Baez and Erod back a few years ago. But in the Harris era, we haven't seen it. And until it does happen, I'm going to have reservations about whether they're legitimately going to be players in a market like that. But I do think that he is one of the players that's going to, I guess I'll say, benefit the most from Juan Soto signing. It's going to be a huge contract, and a lot of teams are going to pivot and go, okay, who are the next best hitters on the market? And Adames, given his offensive output in his career and his positional versatility around the infield, I think he's going to have a really big market and make somebody very, very happy with signing him. Let's talk about starting pitching, because I think that is kind of the next natural pivot from Soto, and then obviously a huge step down, Adames. Then we get into the starting pitching market: Corbin Burns, Max Fried, Sasaki. There's a lot of really intriguing names out there, and the Tigers should be players for some starting pitching. So we'll talk about that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best, and they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have so many great offers and deals. They use curation to make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All-in pricing, you can toggle this feature, and it'll show your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can also get a panoramic view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly where you're sitting and what the view is. And your purchases obviously covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shouts to everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we kick off the exciting week that hopefully will be winter meetings, talking about that's really what most of next week is going to be about. Just talking about all the news and notes and rumors we're hearing and moves that are being made out of winter meetings in 2024. Again, it takes place in Dallas, Texas. Go SMU Mustangs, by the way. Looking forward to that ACC championship game. Go pony up, baby. So we're talking about the starting pitching market now. Obviously mentioned that some of the biggest names in the offensive market. Pitching-wise, Corbin Burnes is, I think, probably going to go soon after Juan Soto signs as well for a similar reason of Willy Adames, right? It's just like next tier of free agent after Juan Soto, who's in a tier completely of his own. Corbin Burnes certainly falls into that as one of the best players that is a free agent this year and is going to get a ton of money. Probably over 200 mil, which I think has only happened a single-digit amount of times in the history of baseball for a starting pitcher. He's going to get paid. He's going to make someone very happy. The Tigers won't be a player in that market either. Max Fried, I think, could wait a little bit longer just to see how the Corbin Burnes market materializes, right? He probably lets him sign first. And then, like Blake Snell obviously signed already, but that could help determine the market for everybody else a little bit. Although I think Burns' case is more of, okay, I want more than that. But we'll see. I think Fried could be an interesting piece, come like January. If he wants to be the best starting pitcher on the market, he probably waits a little bit. And then obviously you have Roki Sasaki, who we talked about on this show when he first, it was first broke that he was going to get posted this year. I don't think he officially has. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to double check. But I think we're still waiting on that officially to happen. Either way, teams are, according to Passan at ESPN, who had a great article, if you have ESPN Plus, just kind of laying out all of the news and notes that he is hearing going into winter meetings. Good read for sure. Helps me prepare for this show for sure. So shout out to that. Go support journalists' work there. But Sasaki is I think one of the more, I don't know if I want to say underrated, just because I don't know, anybody who follows the game of baseball is aware of how good he is and how much of a steal it's going to be for any team that gets him, right? Like he's not a UFA. He's not an unrestricted free agent. He's an international free agent. So he's going to get international free agent money, which is, a couple $1 million, and everybody's just going to offer him all of their international free agent pool money that they have available. So it's really him just going where he actually wants, because money is not going to be a factor. It's not like Yamamoto last year. So he will decide, and teams I'm sure are preparing like presentations and pitches to be like, hey, this is why you should choose us, more so than the other way around. But obviously Juan Soto's the prize of this winter. I think there's a legitimate argument Sasaki is like the second most valuable get you can have, just because it's not going to be a big contract, and he is so young as well, similar to Juan Soto. I think there's a real argument for that. So that'll be really fun to see how that market develops. Let's talk about trade market a little bit. I think that there are a lot of really interesting teams in the trade market. And I don't say that just to be like, hey, for the sake of this conversation, there's a lot of interesting teams. The reason I think that now more than I have in previous years is because of the expanded postseason. And we saw this year how much that factors the trade deadline, and not necessarily that there's just going to be more volume of deals straight up. even though that could result in that. I think that the biggest factor is just that everybody kind of, I guess not has to draw a line in the sand of what they want, but everybody could make a trade. There is a reason for everybody to make a move. You either want to be a buyer and just get to that, 86-ish win mark, which will put you into wildcard conversation these days, or you're at the bottom of the barrel and you're selling to one of those teams. And while that's always been the case, there's a lot less of the fluff in the middle just because there are more teams that make the postseason than ever before. Obviously, one of the teams that is not going to be in the postseason mix and is certainly going to sell this winter is the Chicago White Sox, which is obviously relevant to all of us here in Detroit because they are a division rival and we just absolutely beat up on them. Everybody in baseball, they had the most losses ever. So I think Garrett Crochet is going to be traded. I don't know if that happens this week necessarily. I think that that's also a trade that probably waits until after Corbin Burns, maybe even Max Fried sign, just because A, you know what suitors are truly in it for Crochet, but B, you have a better understanding of value of some of these players. So I think that Crochet does get traded this winter. I'd be shocked if he went into spring training still on the South side. And then one of my biggest pet peeves in sports, really, but especially the game of baseball, is when teams don't draw a line in the sand and go, we are doing this or doing that. I cannot stand it. I can't stand when a team is like, oh, well, like we're going to hold on to some of our assets and don't half-a it, man. Like just either go all in or all out. I'm not saying you have to like go for a World Series every single year. I understand the concept of keeping long-term assets for sure. Like the Tigers shouldn't have just traded all of their prospects for. I'm not saying be reckless about it, but I think that the White Sox holding on to Luis Robert is just ridiculous to me. They are not going to be good in the early stages of that contract and what is left on it. Maybe they can make a run by the time he is at the end of that contract, but the value is never going to be higher than what it is right now. And if you trade Crochet, it is unbelievably stupid in my eyes to hold on to Robert. So we will see what happens with Luis Robert Jr. I think that they should seriously consider trading him. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that would pay a really pretty penny to get their hands on him. Speaking of trades, I think that the Toronto Blue Jays are one of the biggest stories of winter meetings, genuinely. And the reason why is because no one knows where their headspace is at. Again, drawing that line in the sand. They either have to go all in on this core and extend Vlad Guerrero Jr. and make him the building block of the future and go out and spend a lot more money and add a lot more pieces around him, or they have to look at what has already happened in the 5 or 6 years that they've had Vlad Jr. and go, well, we haven't really got close, so let's try again and trade him this winter when his value is at his highest, and probably then trade Bo Bichette too. And I don't think it really makes sense to hold on to one and not the other, similar to the White Sox conversation. Right? So you have two wildly different avenues there. You have playoff competitor and going to be aggressive in signing him. And they were in on Ohtani. We all remember the report about Ohtani allegedly getting on a plane and flying to Toronto. That never happened. Like you have stuff like that, or they're going to be like pretty comfortably at the bottom of the AL East for the next 3 or 4 years. It is wild how different those two paths are. And I think that the Blue Jays become instantly one of the more interesting teams in this winter meetings and really throughout the entire rest of the offseason. Let's talk about another AL East team that could be interesting in terms of a trade market. Then we'll get into some of the other names that could be signed or moved this week as well. We'll do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in as always. Want to talk about the Tampa Bay Rays, who are in a very interesting situation. Probably not going to have their, well, definitely not. They're playing at Steinbrenner Field this year because of the hurricane that was obviously devastating to thousands and thousands of people and tore apart the roof of Tropicana Field. So unfortunately, they will be playing there. I don't think that has like a huge factor on what they do. The Rays are the Rays. They've been cheap forever. They always trade players before they have to sign them. That's just how the Rays operate. I am very interested in what they do with Yandy Diaz. And we talked about the potential fit for the Tigers in Yandy Diaz a couple of weeks ago now. I'm not sure they're going to be a huge player in that market, the Tigers at least. But I think that it is worth kicking the tires on, certainly. Again, we talked about that a lot more in depth a couple of weeks ago. I'm just interested in, like, he's getting up there in age and he's going to be a free agent soon. I think that this is prime Rays trade you territory. And I'll be interested in seeing what happens there. And then if they end up trading him, I think an under-the-radar trade candidate is Jeffrey Springs. Had an injury a couple of years ago, came back, has been a front to mid-rotation starter, very talented, elite changeup that pretty much dominates the Tigers every time he pitches against us. I think that would be an interesting market for a similar reason as well. His value probably, well, I mean, it could get higher, I guess, if he has a really good year this year, but I think that he's another guy, if the Rays are truly trying to add offense and they kind of have their pitching lab factory thing down there, that they can maybe afford to move him for some good offense and some good bats with team control. So we'll see what happens in that department as well. One of the biggest questions I have that I think may start to get answered this week is just, does anybody want to play in Sacramento? The Oakland Athletics are now the Sacramento Athletics for a couple of years, and then they become the Las Vegas Athletics. So I am, the A's are already cheap, similar to the Rays conversation. They already don't really sign anybody. But does anybody want to play in Sacramento? That was a great point that was brought up by ESPN as well. Like, I think that's a great question. Does anybody want to play for what is widely considered to be the worst ownership group in the sport in a minor league stadium in Sacramento, where there's no established fan base, for a team that has been pretty bad over the last 3 or 4 years? Tough sell, I'd imagine. Tough sell. So we'll see what happens with that. Alec Bohm. We did a whole episode on Alec Bohm to Detroit and that possibility a couple of weeks ago as well. I think that market probably waits until after Bregman signs, just because I think the Phillies are in on Bregman. So I think that inherently, until that decision is finalized, Bohm is probably going to stay in Philly. But after that, we could see that market heat up a little bit. People pivot from, okay, best third baseman on the market. Who's the next best available that we could acquire? And I think Bohm is going to be pretty high up there for most teams. I'm really interested in that just because, hey, the Tigers are probably at least a decent player in that. I'm not sure they're a high-end, super likely candidate. But I think that there is a market there for really, again, everybody, but especially the Tigers, who are looking to improve at third base. And yeah, just from the Phillies' perspective, they tend to bring in really high-end talent, and we haven't really seen them make a trade of this caliber. Guy that's been an all-star before, still is pretty young, kind of fits into their team really well. What kind of return they would be asking for if that were to happen. Obviously, two of the biggest names on the trade market going into this week are Nolan Arenado and Cody Bellinger. You know, the Belly thing, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think it lines up with anybody. I wouldn't take Cody Bellinger unless the Cubs ate some of that money. I don't like that contract really at all. And he's been so inconsistent offensively over the last, really his whole career. I don't know. And like the Tigers obviously aren't a player. They don't need another lefty, streaky hitting outfielder. But like I, it's just, I don't know. I can't imagine any team is really chomping at the bit to go give up assets to bring him in. Similar to the Arenado conversation. Obviously, we've talked about that several times as far as the Tigers fit there over the last couple of weeks. So we don't have to go into that again. But I think that his name is just going to be brought up a lot. And you're probably going to see a lot of rumors surrounding Nolan Arenado. I think I'm pretty heavy in the camp of the Cardinals are going to trade him. So we'll see what happens there. Outfield free agent market, Jurickson Profar, Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez. I don't think any of them sign after, or rather before Juan Soto does. So you'll have to wait on Soto's announcement before any of those guys do, just because they're also, outfielders that can hit for power and whatever. So teams aren't going to be interested in them until Soto signs and determines that market. I think a couple of teams to watch over the next couple of weeks, and certainly this upcoming week in winter meetings, are the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds, a pair of NL Central teams. Now that you don't have the big bad Cardinals that just kind of are on a league of their own in the NL Central. Obviously, the Brewers have been good for a while now. That's not disrespect to them, but I think the NL Central, along with just the expanded postseason and the wild card being what it is now, is a little bit more open. The Reds had a really good year 2 years ago, took a step back in 2024. And I think they're looking to get back on there. Ellie De La Cruz has obviously blossomed into one of the better players in the sport. They have some decent pitching in there as well if Hunter Green can stay healthy. I think that they're in the market to add some bats. And, obviously they just traded Jonathan India to bring in Brady Singer, which helps round out their rotation a little bit more. I think they want to add an outfielder. They won't be in on Soto. They're not a big enough market. But I do think those other names that I just mentioned, the Reds could be in on. And then the Pirates, I think, just are in a position to trade pitching for offense. They have so many great pitchers that are young and either like just debuted recently or are prospects even still. Like they have so much pitching talent that I really think that they're in a prime position to go bring in a young controllable bat to help this offense get over the hump for a pitcher that they have on their roster. Obviously, the reliever market is going to be talked about a lot after now Aroldis Chapman has signed. Not that he was the best one available. He was very far from it, especially at this point in his career. But him signing for over 10 mil, I mean, that's a lot of money for a short-term deal for an older reliever. I think that that's going to determine a lot of the market. And I think you could see quite a few relief pitchers sign this upcoming week. As far as the Tigers go, we'll end on this. I think that the Tigers, honestly, I have what I could sell you and what I could tell you to try to get you excited for it, and I have the cold waters of reality that I probably believe, and that is that the Tigers are probably going to have a pretty quiet week. I don't anticipate them to make any huge splash in winter meetings. That doesn't mean that they're going to be quiet all off season. But I mean, looking at all of the biggest stories of winter meetings that I just laid out for you, I don't see the Tigers being, as I said, if you were paying attention to what I was saying after almost every single one of these stories, I don't expect the Tigers to be huge players in a lot of these markets. And that is somewhat disappointing. And I do understand the frustration there from the fan base. Everybody wants to take this momentum that we had in 2024 and really kind of carry it and ride it into 2025. And you could do that by getting a really big name trade piece or free agent acquisition. And I have faith they will obviously add something, whether that's this week or not. They will add players. They will add assets to some extent. But as far as the biggest stories to watch going into winter meetings, I don't really anticipate the Tigers to be in on a lot of it. And that's somewhat disappointing, given, again, just kind of where they stand in the season, that they just had. You would hope for them to be a little bit more aggressive. Now, if I'm wrong and they go out there and they do bring in, a couple of these big names, then we'll celebrate being wrong. And we'll talk about how awesome it is that they went out and were aggressive during winter meetings or during the rest of the winter and the offseason period. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think the Tigers are in a position where they should be seriously considering, just spending money and signing free agents, up payroll. It's one of the lowest in all of baseball. That goes without saying. But on top of that, they have a big enough prospect pool and enough talent at the major league level now where I think it makes all the sense in the world for them to start considering trading your non-elite top-end prospects for current major league talent. And I hope that maybe we hear some of those rumors this upcoming week, because that would make it a lot more fun for all of us. As far as the big dates to know over the winter meetings, everybody comes in Sunday. They officially kick off as far as like events go Monday morning, actually Sunday night, I want to say. Tuesday, you have the MLB draft lottery. We'll talk about that a little bit more on Tuesday, and obviously Wednesday's show once we get the results. The Tigers are not a part of the lottery this year because they made the postseason, so we'll just see for entertainment purposes where, other our rivals and what other teams in the division, if the White Sox get a high pick or if they fall, et cetera, et cetera. And then Wednesday, you have the Rule 5 draft. As I said, that is obviously the official kind of end of winter meetings, usually, even though most people don't leave the resort hotel, wherever it's at this year, until Thursday. So we'll see what happens. All right. It was kind of just a round robin show, kind of just talking about all the biggest stories that I'm keeping an eye on. Not all of these are, not most of them, not even half of them, probably not even a third of them are going to be resolved over the next, 5 days. But I anything could happen, including nothing. And we will be here through it all. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we start what hopefully is an exciting week of off-season baseball. Hopefully it's not an absolute snooze fest like it has been the last couple of years. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.